Welcome to Brands of Value, the podcast for leaders and changemakers. I am your host, David Götz, a curious mind interested in marketing strategy and startup consulting. Join me on this insightful journey into the heart of value creation in business. Each episode, we uncover the untapped and underutilized potential that lies within the realms of business and communication. Together with esteemed guests from diverse fields of business and expertise, we navigate the landscape of spotting, utilizing, and effectively communicating this potential to drive tangible value for businesses. Get ready for engaging conversations, practical insights, and a deep dive into the strategies that can transform your approach to business, unlocking new dimensions of success. Today's expert is Falk Ebert. Falk Ebert has worked with many companies and now is a marketing and innovation consultant. I got to know Falk at Liganova, the brand retail agency, where he was my boss in the strategy department. I invited Falk because we always had great discussions on new technologies and ideas in marketing, and I really value the way he approaches these topics. Hi, Falk. Could you tell us a little bit more about who you are, what you do, and what interests you?
Yeah. Hi to you. Hi to your listeners. Let's start with what interests me. I think it's always been the new kind of stuff that interests me, which of course always changes because there's always something new. And I've always been working at the intersection of these innovations and marketing. For example, I don't know, like 15 years ago, it was like NFC, not NFT, but NFC that was the new thing, or QR codes. And lately it's more like metaverse or AI, of course. Generative AI is quite big at the moment. And I always try to help companies to understand the value of these kind of changes and what kind of value that might bring in marketing and with their communications especially. So for 1.5 years now, I've been a freelancer. Before that, I was working for several agencies, including Scholz & Friends, United Digital Group, which is now part of the PIA, and where we've met, you've mentioned it, Liganova, and I've just been building strategy and consulting teams there, working for mostly big international brands and helping them to leverage innovations for their marketing.
Thanks for that very nice summary of what you've done and where you've been. I got to know you as a person who's not just chasing the newest trend. You just said you're always looking for the new, but I thought you were always quite realistic with your approach to all of these topics. So I'm really looking forward to see how you think about special formats or special content formats today, the topic that we want to talk about today. But the show is called Brands of Value. What does value in the context of business actually mean to you?
I mean, it can mean a lot of things, obviously, right? It's one of those terms that can mean everything and nothing, like metaverse. And like in my like daily work, it can mean anything from very intangible, visionary, soft things, like the kind of values that you would write into a brand model and then say this is a brand value, up to like very concrete, tangible, quantitative measures like performance marketing measures. And whenever a term can be heard on that many different levels, it's usually the best way forward just to talk about that explicitly with your client and ask them, what do you mean when you say value? How do we want to define it within this project or this consultation now, and really narrow it down? Because as I said, it can mean everything and nothing.
So in our little chat before we started, you pointed out to me that one of my prepositions was wrong. I came into this saying, oh, okay, I'm going to talk with Falk about interesting formats and talking heads and Reddit AMAs and all of these things. They can't happen on traditional media like TV and newspapers. You actually went in and were like, no. You're thinking about this the wrong way. Don't think in channels. Could you elaborate on that? This show is supported by the 30-Minute University of Planning. The 30-Minute University is a free community with over 10,000 people from all over the world, consisting of mentors and mentees from strategy departments. They facilitate 30-minute one-on-one meetings between seasoned professionals and those at the start of their careers. If you are a young professional looking to learn from the best in the business, or a strategist looking to share your expertise, search the 30-Minute University on LinkedIn.
Yeah, so maybe if we try to narrow it down a little bit, what we want to talk about today, we've been discussing about what can you talk about, right? Because the interesting point that I see currently happening, and the point that I hope is interesting to your listeners as well, would be it's often overlooked that you can just tell incredibly interesting stories and have great and successful communications in your marketing mix if you just talk about reality, as in stuff that really happens. Just show what you're doing, just talk about what your expertise is about anyways, that kind of stuff. And yeah, as you said, interestingly, this is not necessarily tied to new forms. Of course, we're seeing that new forms of media. I mean, yes, we're seeing that on TikTok, but you can also do these kind of, let's call it real life storytelling, if you will. You can also do that on very traditional channels, and you can still do the very let's call it fictional way of storytelling, where you come up with stories, you invent stories. You can also do that on modern channels as well. So it's just one of two ways of doing storytelling. Let's call it real life storytelling versus fictional storytelling, and you can do both on very new and very traditional channels if you want.
Could you give us an example of that?
Yeah, sure. So we have this 2x2 matrix right now, right? New channels, old channels, fictional storytelling, and real life storytelling. And if we, let's say, start with new channels, let's take TikTok, for example. We see that there are some brands very, very successful doing the fictional kind of storytelling. Like, just think of that infamous backpack brand, Ever. Quite sure you've heard of them, right?
Yes.
That have this little, let's call it The Office version for Gen Z. So they have these fictional characters of two people working in their marketing, and they're talking to each other, and the Gen Z one is not respecting their boss, and they're doing a little work-related daily soap, and they're not talking about the product at all, not about product quality. It's all just a little stage play to talk about the brand, right? That's kind of fictional storytelling on TikTok. But then again, you also have interesting stuff like, this is a super random example, but that's why I think it's so interesting. There's a mortician called Bestattungen Burger. Have you heard of them?
I have not.
Like literally a mortician, and it's just one guy from them. It's a little Bavarian company. It's just a younger employee from them, just plainly and openly and without any kind of sensationalism or anything, answering questions about dying, working with a mortician, what can happen to you after your death, what are the exact processes, what they do with the bodies, and all that kind of stuff. And just because it's super interesting, because you rarely talk about these topics, and you rarely talk to a mortician in your real life, right? And just because it's interesting, it's genuinely interesting what they're doing and how they're talking about it. They've gotten 1.3 million followers, which is crazy if you think about it. It's a small mortician from a local area in Bavaria doing that kind of content in German. And they've gotten over 1 million followers and a lot of likes with these. So that would be an example for real life storytelling on newer channels like TikTok.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, the same thing could be said for traditional channels. If you think about, is YouTube a traditional channel by now? Probably
I'd say it kind of is. I mean, we've had over 10 years of YouTube, so yeah. I guess you can call it traditional.
I mean, a bit more than 10 even. No, but let's take like newspaper advertorials, right? I've been working with big energy and B2B companies. And you can of course make up stories. You can do advertising copy that is not really fact based or just that kind of stuff. But you can also just tell some of the really interesting, big, crazy, international, highly expensive projects that you have as a B2B company, and tell this kind of story in an advertising advertorial, or use it for PR purposes. And then it ends up in the newspaper as well if you do your job right. So that would be an example for traditional channels, where also both approaches can work.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. Very awesome examples. I think, actually, think about it, I did see some video of that mortician at some point. So it did pop up at some point. This concept of building in public is is a concept which we find often in startups as well. Are you saying that companies should approach it a little bit more like a startup?
I'm always hesitant to give out that advice because, of course, startups and scale ups and blue chip companies work differently, and they do that for a reason. Like you wouldn't do your company a favor if, for example, you did the risk taking that startups do in your everyday life. But I mean, yes, there's some truth to that saying, and in general, big companies would be well advised to just take little hints of inspiration from how successful startups and scale-ups do their marketing. Yes, and the point specifically that you've been mentioning, like building in public, I think there's some power in that as well. And I think this will only increase over time. But of course, you always need to check, like, what are you giving away? What are the legal implications of you giving stuff away, and so on and so on. But just like the other day, I was thinking, just being a little bit more transparent about the roadmap, especially if you have products that or ecosystems that people sign up for and invest in and build upon, then just being a little bit more open about your roadmap. What do you want to do or achieve in the next couple of years with your product might actually help to give your customers the confidence to invest in that ecosystem or that product. Yeah.
I see that quite a bit in gaming, the sort of gaming balancing roadmaps and things like that. I think they're quite an integral part of developing an online game which keeps on going and keeps living.
Yeah, and I mean, the best example from gaming that I often had on my PowerPoint presentations when talking to big companies as well is Minecraft. If you think about it, like, it started as an open alpha, right? The guy who did Minecraft was really open about it. Then it was an open beta, and you could, for not a lot of money, have you been able to buy the game, download it, and play it before it was even like finalized in the traditional sense. And there were a couple of dynamics there. Of course, it's like a move in terms of communications, like people talk about it and when they get to try it out. But most importantly, it's an amazing way to get feedback during development. And Notch, the creator of Minecraft, was also very open about this. Like, he made it easy for people to write mods or modifications for the Minecraft game, and just so that people could, if they didn't find a feature they would love to have in the game, they could just write a mod that would then implement that feature in the game. And he was quite open about it. Like, he said he would never steal code. Like, he's not taking the actual lines of code from this mod, but he was very open about that he's taking ideas from those modifications. So you could basically just see what are people missing in the game. He could try out some of those mods and see what works, what doesn't, what do I want to incorporate it in the game. And so Minecraft is one of these stories where millions of players played the game before it was even officially out of beta, going 1.0. And as we all know, Minecraft turned out to be a literally multi-billion-dollar business, all started by one guy in his bedroom, more or less.
A global legendary game that people still pick up nowadays. Gen Alpha getting into Minecraft. I've seen that tagline somewhere.
I mean, Gen Alpha getting into Minecraft is probably driven by Gen Y and Gen X introducing it to their kids. So yeah, when my daughter is of age to play Minecraft, it's certainly something that we will do as a parent-child activity. Yeah.
Yes, very cool. Earlier on, when you talked about the guy who gained 1.3 million followers for their business, I was like, do followers even still matter? Do you feel like the metrics that we choose are still current?
I mean, it's a good question. And it's kind of lazy from me to pick followers as a success metric. What you must look at, of course, is the views on individual videos, then the engagement rates, and then also on any kind of indication whether that translates into business for them or not. And of course, not each one of the 1.3 million followers is going to be a client for them anytime soon. We can only hope. It's a
Hopefully not.
Yeah. No, and especially since the social media game has changed a little bit and followers don't directly translate to views anymore. And views have never directly translated into other kind of business metrics that indicate success. It's very important to see beyond the followers and also adjust your strategy so that you're not only trying to build a follower base anymore, but really try to have an impact with each and every one of your content pieces so that you can really break through the noise of these TikTok style platforms.
Yeah, it's a very interesting topic because that whole the content is less and less and less focused on just selling things and more on building brand, but then businesses always want the business case, right? And they often question, so what does this do for my sales? And making that connection in what the value of the content creation is to the sale in 3 years or in 5 years or in 10 years, that's something that's, I think, difficult for most marketers.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's probably very, very important that everybody in marketing understands the funnel and the role that the brand plays in sales. And to be fair, this is an ongoing discussion for 10 plus years. And if you ask really like people who study it from an academic side, they will be telling you that you can not only invest in performance marketing or not only invest in brand marketing. So yeah, it's important I think to keep the bigger picture in mind, that brand building really helps with your sales. And it's also important not to use that as an excuse to, just do content that's fun, but doesn't really help with your business. So especially if working with big brands and big budgets, you need to have a good idea of how what you're doing drives value at the end of the day. And by value now, I mean if you want the EBIT of your company, and how you want to measure that, and if you can't perfectly measure it, which is going to be the case for most of the time, then you need a good idea of how you want to measure some data points that at least are a good indication of what we're doing is working. And by working, we mean contributing to the success of the company. And by success, of course, we mean the financial success of the company. If you're not in a non-profit, that's a different story then.
Well, but even there's often financial success tied to donations or things like that that can matter to the company.
I mean, fundraising is a battlefield, absolutely. Fundraising is very hard to do. It can be also a lot of fun to do. And the good thing about fundraising is you can measure your success quite well. It's literally a return on invest. So in that sense, I think many marketeers working in the middle management of big brands could learn something from fundraisers when it comes to marketing return on invest.
Yeah, the marketing ROI is quite a hot debate, and I recently I saw a post on TikTok saying, "Oh, so what actual metric is there?" But that's, I think, for another time. we here want to talk about non-traditional ways of doing marketing. Do you have a go-to case that you always show other than Minecraft that you could tell us about?
I mean, Minecraft is a great case for open innovation, if you want to call it that way. It's a term that's been around for quite some time. There are interesting cases, like, again, super random case, but it kind of makes a point that I make with companies. It's Tischler NRW from the state of Nordrhein-Westfalen or North Rhine-Westphalia. And they're just having young apprentices in the carpentry business showing what they've built for their final exam, like the Seilstücke in German. And you just have very passionate young carpenters showing off the carport that they made. And it's like really cool pieces. And there's no, not a big creative concept behind it or anything, but it really works because you see their passion, you see how much love they put into these projects. Honestly, it's usually like really cool stuff that they've been building, and really helps the case to promote the business of carpentry or the industry of carpentry that they're in. That's also a wonderful example. Or one company that has been doing it right, the kind of real life storytelling, and has been doing it right for over a decade, would be the shipping company Maersk. Have you heard of them before?
I've not.
Like if you're in logistics, you've probably heard of them. They've used to be the biggest ship-based logistics company.
Oh, Maersk, yes, of course, based in Hamburg, right?
I mean, they're a Danish company, but if you're in Hamburg, you see these blue containers with the white stars all over the place, right? Yeah. Like if you look at the office buildings in Hamburg, if you're near the harbor, you will see Maersk containers all over the place. And they also, like, when social media became a thing, they've been starting to just share pictures, from their everyday work. Like they have gigantic ships, they have these huge masses of containers, interesting ways of transportation. And of course, the vast open sea and the ports and everything. And it's just sharing beautiful pictures from their daily life, basically, or their daily work life on Instagram. And the Nordic community really loved it. The logistics community was highly interested. They've then started, again, like telling stories from their everyday life, like some lakes freezing in Russia, and suddenly you have these new lines for transportation, and everything has to go really fast. And even like seemingly tragic or very negative stories, like one of these ships ramming a whale, they used for an opportunity for storytelling, and just talked about why did that happen, how did that whale end up at the front of the ship, what can we as an industry do to prevent these kind of things, what are we doing as a company to prevent this kind of things. And it really resonated with people. So you saw a huge success on their social media communications from early on. Also, the marketing manager who was behind it, I think they quickly changed to a consultancy like Boston or McKinsey afterwards. And even today, if you check out the Maersk _official on TikTok, they're doing quite well. By just telling stories about their everyday work. So beyond that, I think it's important to note that it's not always the case studies from brands you should be looking at. Sometimes it always helps to just observe what people are doing on social media. So this is my last example to your question. If you look at some subreddits, for example, like Reddit, it has been growing constantly in the last years. It's often overlooked, but it's a force to be taken into consideration. And if you look at subreddits like machine porn, which is perfectly safe for work, it's literally about big business-to-business machines. You can see that people love to see big machines there, engineering. So just looking into these spaces and saying, hey, we as, I don't know, Bosch, Siemens, whatever, we have amazing pictures of our products to share. We have stories to tell. We could do an Ask Me Anything about it. Could have a huge impact both for your business side, but also for your employer branding endeavors, for example. So I think there's lots of untapped potential in just talking about stuff that's actually coming out of your day-to-day operations.
Very interesting. Would you say that is a move away from demographic-based marketing towards interest-based marketing?
Yes, it is. And I think in general that it's a good way to take that step. I mean, I can't speak for all industries equally here, but I feel like there's a tendency to overestimate and to overfixate on quote unquote Gen Z marketing at the moment. Because I mean, certainly there are things where you need to talk differently to Gen Z or let's say to a certain age demographic. And there are channels where you reach them better or worse. For example, Roblox, right? Roblox does have a different age distribution than daytime TV, for example.
Very different.
Most likely very different. But at the same time, if you look at, let's say, political positions, or just in general how these target groups think about life, and you look at the hard data, like not the story that the self-proclaimed Gen Z experts are to tell you, but the hard data of what people actually think, you see that Gen Z is not that different from other demographics in many regards, not as different as they are made out to be. So yes, I think it's a refreshing approach, and it's an approach that actually resonates quite well with the mechanisms of social media platforms to say, we are now talking about, I don't know, big excavating machines. And whoever's interested in that is very welcome to consume and like and share our content. Doesn't matter whether it's a 6-year-old school kid who's just really into excavating machines or a 60-year-old veteran who's been working for our company 10 years ago. All of them liking our content, interacting with it will help us to get more exposure for it, and also get more exposure for it for the people that need to see it from a business perspective.
That's a very interesting thought, especially in the sense that your marketing or social media target group is not necessarily directly your customer group. I really like that approach as well with a company we both know very well, with Porsche. I think they're doing an awesome job at really speaking to a certain kind of person rather than saying, here's our Porsche, buy our car. And they went into the topic of dreams and really, claimed that for themselves and said, people who own our cars are dreamers, but everybody can be a dreamer. And I really like that sort of approach to marketing where you come from a topic and you really claim that topic for yourself and get fans around that topic. And then within that nearly happen like a product placement.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And speaking of cars and indirect marketing approaches, I mean, there are some good data points pointing in the direction that the opinions of kids are actually quite important when it comes to their parents choosing car brands. So, like, I have a vivid memory of my little sister who was really, really pushing my dad towards buying a specific car at the time. It wasn't because of the brand; it was because it had good in-car entertainment. But still, yeah, it's important to think of the buying center, whether it's B2B or B2C.
So on another topic, I recently saw a really interesting idea or really interesting post on YouTube by Chris Doe. I don't remember what the guest was, but he talked about storytelling versus narratives and of the overusage of the word storytelling and the misunderstanding of it. What's your take on that?
I don't have a take on that specifically because I didn't hear it. But I certainly have to agree that storytelling is an overused term. And just like content marketing 10 years ago, right? Suddenly everything was content marketing. And again, if you feel like these terms become very omnipresent and can mean a lot of things, it's probably best to take a step down and ask, what do we really mean by storytelling? What do we really mean by content marketing? What do we really mean by metaverse? And then ask the follow-up question, like, what's new in this approach that we're describing here? And you probably should do that for storytelling as well. Maybe you can tell me what was his point was.
Yeah, the point was quite interesting. They said, hey, this term storytelling is misused. What we're actually often talking about when we want to shape brands is narrative, and narratives are larger than stories. They, for example, the American dream is a narrative that many people subscribe to, and then within that narrative have their own individual experiences, which can then represent stories. But that marketing is quite often more about the building a direction or a larger vision, or and then stories happen within that, and you can talk about these stories, but in the end they all follow the same narrative. Also, one thing was that stories have a beginning, a middle, and an end. They are closed entities in themselves, especially when you think about the traditional ways of the sort of academic ways of storytelling and how they thought about it. And a narrative has a beginning and a direction, but it has no end. So it's a little bit like pixels versus vectors, you know. A vector points into a direction, whilst a pixel is just a defined value.
Yes. No, absolutely can get behind that kind of thinking, especially when you're taking the perspective of a brand, right? For how do you define your brand? And often brands follow these narratives without even being aware of it. So that's quite interesting when you do strategy work with a brand, like with a toolkit of a brand planner. Sometimes your job is mostly, I would even say in most of the times, your job is more to discover these narratives then, rather than making them up or trying to oppose them, put them on top of the brand. More like trying to find what's the narrative really driving this company or this brand here. And still, I would say the storytelling in the more narrow term that has a beginning and that has an end, that is more like a point less than a vector. There's still a lot of power in that if you do it right. Like I remember vividly, that was that was a meeting among brand planners at Scholz and Friends Strategy Group, like years ago, like over a decade ago. And it was about content marketing and everything. And to illustrate the point of storytelling, one of the strategists in their contribution to the meeting just started like, yesterday, I woke up and immediately sensed there was something special about that day, right? Can you feel it? And
yeah.
And then I brushed my teeth and I went to work and everything was normal, but at the same time not normal. And then I went to work and nothing special happened that day because I was just trying to tell you the power of storytelling. But but it feels like a letdown, and that kind of illustrates quite well the power of storytelling within, of course, the context of bigger narratives that you probably want to serve as a brand.
Yeah, that whole sort of creating tension, I really love that whole topic. There's a really interesting guy named David J.P. Phillips who does collects a lot of research on the way storytelling affects us emotionally through what he calls the angel's cocktail and the devil's cocktail of emotions. Really, really interesting stuff. But let's kind of make a full circle back to where we were at the beginning. So now we've talked about storytelling and about narrative. How does that all tie into the idea of real life storytelling?
I mean, the connection here is apparently that whether you tell stories that are completely or mostly based on real life occurrences and on something that is not out of the ordinary for your company, or whether you tell stories that are completely fictional and only indirectly related to your company, like both applies. They should be contributing to a bigger narrative, if you want to use the term in that way that you just outlined. It should be contribute to the bigger narrative that your brand is moving towards or pointing in the direction of. And you should use the power of storytelling as a craft, as a skill, as a mechanism to tell the stories in a way that people want to listen to your story. Whether it is a Fortnite game, a branded Fortnite experiences that needs to convince you to play it after the first 2 interactions that you had with it, or whether it's a TikTok video, or whether it's a TV ad or a newspaper advertisement or PR story that you're putting out there. Because somehow we humans are hardwired to follow narratives and listen to stories. So let's use that no matter what kind of story we're telling.
Now, if I was a CMO, I'd be going like, okay, sounds interesting. This whole storytelling, this whole maybe using Fortnite, but how can I measure it? How much does it cost? Where do I get started? What would you reply to that?
I would expect of a CMO to have some kind of idea how to answer these questions already.
Fair.
Maybe not underestimate CMOs. And if you have like an idea of within your company, like where are your areas of attack already? Like what do you need to do as a CMO? Whether it's you need to change the brand perception for certain markets and demographics or target group segments, whether it's you need to increase sales with certain products or whatever. If you have an indication of that, that's probably a good starting point to turn it around and then say, we have problem X. Is there any value in what you just talked about to help solve problem X? And then you can decide, do I need something that reaches a lot of people, creating awareness, maybe shaping the brand a little bit? Do I need something that reaches very specific people, like buyers of electric power plants, which aren't that many in the world? Mm-hmm. Do I need something that converts measurably into sales then? Do I need something that just is a door opener for our sales team to go in and close the deal later? And then you can start connecting the dots. But in general, it's very important to always look at the bigger picture of how does marketing and branding and communications, how do these things actually work and play together, rather than being narrow-minded and just keeping the focus on measurable sales.
Mm-hmm. And how would you go about it? Would you say there's both value in trying to build it in-house and outsourcing it, or would you recommend one to go for one first and then for the other, or the other way around?
I mean, if we're pitting like the raw storytelling, or if you want to call it that way, or the real life storytelling versus the very fictional material, mm-hmm. It's quite apparent that the real life storytelling needs way more involvement from people that actually come from within your company, because they know what the real stories are. They have the real pictures, and if not, they might know where they might know where to take the best pictures and so on. So if you work with an agency, you really must embed the agency within your company, or the other way around. And at the same time, especially if you're not a lemonade stand but a blue chip company, communications is still something you need experts for. You're always well advised to have experts help you with your communications. And not everybody who is passionate about something and knowledgeable about something is also somebody you want to put in front of the cameras for your communications. So you need to find the unicorn in your company, ideally, especially for this talking heads format where you just put somebody in front of a TikTok account. You need to find the unicorn in your company that has high levels of charisma, can convey a message very well, and at the same time is passionate and knowledgeable. And I mean, if a company has 200,000 employees, there's a fair chance you find that person, mm-hmm. or it exists. But the question is, do you find it? So yes, deeper integration, deeper cooperation, but still have an outside perspective, challenge you and guide you, and have experts that consult you, I think, are key.
On that point, so when we then go into fictional storytelling, what do you think about the whole rise of fictional influences, of virtual influences of AI-generated content?
I mean, those are kind of different things, probably. Virtual influences, first of all, are actually a very logic outcome of what happened in the last 20 years. Because if you look at somebody like Britney Spears, there's nothing real about her as a musician anyways, you know? She's
fair.
Her costumes are designed by costume designers, exactly. Her makeup is made by makeup artists. Her image is carefully crafted by the management of a music company. So if you use somebody like Miku Hatsune instead, who's a virtual influencer from Japan, if you use her instead of Britney Spears, you're basically doing the same thing. It's just less collateral damage because you don't need to involve a real person that might have a very bad personal history afterwards, like Britney Spears. And it's also perfectly normal for humans to bond with fictional characters and also even non-human looking characters. Like all Star Wars fans in the world have an emotional bond with R2-D2, and he looks like a trash can. So it's normal that it works, and it's highly interesting to explore with companies. I'm actually doing that myself in a couple of projects right now. Actually, this morning I've been working on this. But we need to be realistic as well, and there won't be a lot of Hatsune Miku or Lil Michaelas in the world. It's still the same kind of work, if not even harder, than having an actual ambassador for your company or an influencer of flesh and blood. And I mean, AI generation in a nutshell is something that can really be cost saving, but at the same time, something where brands need to be careful not to overestimate the potential as of today, end of 2023, but more something that brands should explore with use cases and innovation projects and stage gates to see where the space is going and how to embed it into their everyday marketing practices.
Wow, that was a lot to process, but very interesting insights from your industry insight as well. Like you said, you're working on something like that. I guess you can't disclose anything about that.
I mean, you wouldn't be surprised probably if I told you that a lot of companies are right now thinking, wait, should we have an AI-enabled avatar as a brand representative, as a service agent, as a Instagram influencer? I think it's quite a normal thought to have at the moment. So I'm working with a couple of companies to explore this possibility.
And do you think the platforms will welcome that sort of content, or do you think at some point they'll go and shut the doors to that sort of non-human stuff?
No, I don't think they would. Like, I mean, if you think about the incentives of Instagram or TikTok or whatever it is, as long as it drives content and as long as it drives interaction and keeps people engaged on the platform for a longer time, I think they don't mind whether it's organic or digitized, whatever's happening on them, especially since those platforms have good mechanisms of weeding out stuff people are not interested in anyways. Like if you can do a boring AI robot and make TikTok content with it, like no way you're going to make it to anybody's For You page. So why should TikTok care what you do on the platform?
And from what sort of company size do you think it's realistic to be able to create a virtual influencer at the moment?
I mean, for almost every company that has at least one passionate person that knows a little bit about a thing or two about, I don't know, game engines, 3D programs like Blender, ChatGPT implementations. It's really not that hard to do technically. It's more that the bigger that company is, the more it wants to play it safe, etc. The more they want, of course, the influencer to be fully brand safe, to be compliant, to be within certain legal requirements. And that's where the interesting part happens, when you have an AI that is like based on a large language model that could say anything. How do you make sure it's not saying anything that you don't want it to say?
Mm-hmm. Do you think custom GPTs will play into that?
I mean, custom GPTs as the feature on OpenAI is it's a feature, right? A B2C feature. So it's just making something easy that you could have done otherwise. But yeah, like certain layers that control large language models will probably be the key to this. Or you can train your very own large language model, but that is something that's also only for the bigger sized companies, of course.
That's what I wanted to get to. So probably for most companies, it's probably going to be some form of pre-existing program that they use to do all of the work, but then they don't have the same amount of control. Whereas large companies can maybe afford to then build their own models or build upon models with their own data. Very interesting. Falk, what are the 3 sort of hot takes that you have at the moment on the world of marketing and business?
Okay. You can tell me whether it's a sufficiently hot take or not, okay? I'll just go ahead and say some things that I believe in. I think the biggest risk of doing innovative stuff in marketing is never something like brand reputation risk or anything. The biggest risk is always just wasting your marketing budget. Is that hot enough? Does that count?
That's pretty hot. And I'd add to that maybe the opportunity cost of doing something else.
Exactly. You like if just think of the staff working on it. If you put 2 full-time employees on whatever it is, Roblox, NFTs, QR codes, then you not only pay those 2 FTEs, you also have the attention for the management and those 2 FTEs drawn away from something else that you could be working on. Then another maybe not so hot take, but something that's close to my heart is like first do your homework before you do the super fancy stuff. Like first master email before you do social media. First master social media before you do the gaming platforms, and so on and so on. First, have a good sponsoring strategy before you think of whether you should invest in esports sponsoring or not. And I really, that's the third thing. I would love brands to think more about the mechanics that tie personal success in a company with the success of the company as a whole. Because in many companies, especially the ones that are not as good and not as efficient with their marketing, you see that the individual actors, meaning the marketing managers, are not really incentivized to do something that really helps the company, but are incentivized to do some other kind of stuff. So that's my third take. Think more about this relationship.
Do you have any solution for the last one?
I mean, it's just clever design of governance and how incentives work in that. And just thinking more about incentives, and also when working with externals, thinking about stuff like principal agency relations. Like what's the agent's intention? What's our intention? How we can couple them together?
Very good call to action here. Please listen to that, guys. I think changing incentives will have a lot of impact on how we do marketing. Anyways, Falk, now to a personal question. When was the last time when you were like, oh, that business just provided value beyond imagining to me, and I was like so blown away by what they did for the money that I gave them?
I probably have to say it's the implementation of the custom GPTs in ChatGPT. Like I was really amazed by how far I could have pretty handy results there. So that's more on the product side, but I really liked what they've been doing with the product, with the custom GPTs.
That's perfectly fine. That's a really cool, really cool thing, and amazing that they basically just give it to you for free. Do you think they'll monetize that in the future?
Yeah, that's actually been not only rumors. I think there's confirmation that they will have something like a store And they'll even have some kind of revenue sharing for creators of these custom GPTs.
Okay, so becoming the platform.
I mean, they are the platform. It's just, yeah. Again, it's about what we said earlier. It's about incentives, right? They're incentivizing building helpful GPTs, and they're incentivizing communicating helpful GPTs, which of course means communicating the platform as a whole as well.
Awesome. That draws us to an end. Thank you very much. As a final question, if you had to suggest 2 people that could come and talk on the show about business and brands of value, who would they be and why?
I'm not sure. Need to think about it. But probably more like a persona. I would probably think of somebody who's from the academic world, because they also always bring a fresh and no bullshit perspective to the table. And I would think of somebody from very successful B2B brand. Maybe we can have our search radius there, because more often than not, B2B brands are super interesting once you look under the hood of their marketing.
Awesome. Thank you for the suggestions and thank you for the podcast.
Cool. Thank you.
Hey there. This is your host, David Götz. I would like to thank you with all my heart for listening. Hopefully this episode brought you some value. If you enjoy this podcast, consider joining the Value Seekers community on LinkedIn. There you can suggest who you'd like to be on the show, meet other seekers and exchange your ideas. Share the podcast with a person who you think should hear the discussed ideas, and I hope to see you back here very soon. Cheers.